Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to join our today's Master Talk online stream session. Today is our great pleasure to have WOHA co-founders, Mr. Richard, the one on our left side, and also Mr. Wong, who's sitting in the right side with the orange jacket. Let's give a short introduction about WOHA. WOHA is a profound architecture firm that they are famous for constant evolution and renovation. Worldwide, they are one of the key features. They are connecting people with plants, and also they are well known by their vertical gardens throughout all the world. So about Master Talk, previously we have world prestige designers such as founder of Unman, Andre Zaka, master of minimalism, Peter Enselman, master of landscape, Bill Bensley, luxury hotel designer, Yabo Bushberg, and many other prestigious architects, including Thomas Heatherwick, Kingo Kuma, Winnie Mas, and Soki Chen. It's our pleasure to have you here today and share with you our WOHA's concept and ideas. So let's move the stage to WOHA right now.
Thank you, Carrie.
So WOHA today prepared a stunning presentation to our readers. So let's begin this interview with two questions. First of all, we found you in all your design projects, there are always one thing in common, is the sustainability. So can you give us a short presentation how this idea has been implemented throughout all your projects?
Well, yes, sustainability is a key pillar of our practice, and I guess we choose which way to implement it depending on the particular project, and we're interested, I think, in how sustainability can give rise to new forms or strategies. So rather than just being like a box-ticking exercise in terms of a rating tool, we're very interested in how sustainable strategies could shape the way we make buildings, shape the kind of spaces that we create. So we're very interested in sort of passive and resilient forms of sustainability rather than just using technology to improve the performance of a facade, for instance.
We're also very interested in regenerative designs as well, because we think that at this current time that we're in with global warming, it's necessary for us as architects to also at the same time create architecture, but also at the same time help to regenerate our planet with ecosystems services. I think with our talk as we go along is actually entitled Form Follows Systems. And I think you will begin to understand our architecture a bit more if you understand the systems that we are interested in.
So over these years, your approach of being sustainable has been evolved in many projects. So we're wondering how your approach has been influenced in specific countries or specific cultures.
Yes, well, our practice began in Singapore, which has a very particular climate, being almost on the equator. So here it's hot and humid all the year round. We have very low winds and we have a lot of rainfall. So that in many ways shaped how we evolved our strategy in Singapore. And then it's been interesting to bring that model to subtropical and temperate climates. So we've been practicing in Australia now, in Taiwan, in China, in India. I guess everywhere we've been working has been subtropical or warm temperate, not so much you know, we haven't done things in Siberia, for instance, where it's very cold. But I think it's been an interesting journey to move the model from the tropics to the temperate zone, because I think many other architects, they did their education, they have their practice in quite cold temperate climates in the US and Europe, for instance, and in many areas in China, for instance. You sort of come to the problem with a different toolkit when you come from a hot, humid climate.
But I think it's beginning to be quite relevant now, primarily because I think climate change is making your summers very, very hot. And I think this year, particularly so in America, you can see the kind of high temperatures they're experiencing in California. And I think the whole world is going to see a change in the climate for the warmer. So some of the strategies that we kind of been looking at in the tropical region are suitable, but at the same time, we do need to rethink some of the strategies to actually work in the temperate climate as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, we can't wait to see your presentation and understanding those concepts by project. So shall we share the screen right now and let our fans start from understanding project from the hotel categories?
Okay, yes.
Okay, so our talk is called Form Follows Systems, as Mun Summ mentioned, and it's obviously a variation of form follows function, but it highlights the importance of systems thinking in our way of approaching projects. In 2016, we published this book, Garden City, Megacity, and it's a book that really looks at the big picture, what's happening to cities, what's happening to cause global warming, and it's really a call to action, I guess, that since cities are made of buildings, and buildings are a leading cause of global warming, it's up to all of us to take action to ameliorate the effects and also adapt what we're doing to a changing world. So the book is part problem statement and then part a series of strategies that we've evolved for building densely in warm climates. So buildings actually account for 40% of global energy consumption and 75% of CO2 emissions. And by 2050, 70% of world population will live in cities. So we do see the megacities in the developing world as a key contributor and possibly solution to where the world is going. And so some of the strategies we've evolved in our projects and which we show in the book are layering cities. So once you're at high density, the pressure is on the ground level basically. So if we can create more ground levels, we can do really interesting things on those ground levels, such as have parks and gardens versus just apartments or offices. The strategy both and is where we say it's not enough anymore to have a building that's just an apartment building or just an office building. So we need to see whether buildings can be, for instance, both a vibrant residential district and a power plant, for instance. High density, high amenity is to make sure that when we think high density, we don't immediately think of overcrowding and low amenity, but we look at ways using multiple ground levels to make sure that high density areas have all the things that we love about vibrant districts of a city. And cities within cities is that once you have a certain level of density, you have to treat a building as if it's a city. Similarly, sky villages are a way of breaking down large buildings into neighborhoods, and domesticated megastructures is a way of treating large buildings in such a way that they become human in scale. The last one, inverted skyline, is that in a very dense city, actually you don't really get to enjoy the skyline in your daily experience of it, what you do is you enjoy the public spaces through the city. So we can actually create very interesting spatial experiences by thinking of the ground level experience as an inverted skyline, so an experience of different kinds of volumes and heights.
Planting cities is something that I think maybe we are quite sort of well known for, where we have created integrated greenery in our buildings. Most of our buildings do have some form of landscaping in them. And I think in this chapter, we kind of explain 4 key ways in which we look at landscaping. Screens of green is basically a vertical greening of facades and plains. Sky gardens are little pockets of gardens that we have starting to create that becomes urban habitats for animals that sort of dot the buildings as it goes vertical. Sky parks is something more substantial in which we feel is necessary to create substantial part of the building, mostly the roof spaces, in a sort of a concerted effort to make it into a park. Topographical architecture is something that we like to think of creating a building as a device, as an infrastructure to support landscaping.
Breathing cities, so this is particularly evolved in tropical climate, but is actually very applicable in most climates. So thinking how, rather than buildings being sealed up objects, that they're actually interacting with the climate and have indoor and outdoor spaces. So in Singapore, we were very curious as how we should do community spaces, and we show you some of these in our projects coming up, and how to move air through the building. It's very important in the tropics that you always have air movement, and it actually changes the way you design buildings completely. So horizontal breezeways, breezeway atria moving air vertically, breezeway courtyard, so taking the courtyard form but opening it up in such a way that the breeze can come through it. Vertical breezeways, like slots going up through a building. Breezeway towers, where we then accumulate these strategies into ways of organizing large buildings into forms that funnel the wind. And the last one unit thick is always designing units for cross ventilation, whether they're homes or offices. If you can cross ventilate them, they're very resilient forms that aren't reliant on technology for comfort. We have a rating system as well that we use, and these were basically ratings that we developed, we felt, as a bit of a counterbalance to some of the other ratios that are talked about by planners or developers. And so we'll just go through these in a bit more detail.
But these are also the systems that we are interested in, and these systems give rise to the forms that we create in our architecture.
Yep. So green plot ratio is basically integrating the green system landscape through the city. And so it measures the amount of landscape surfaces compared to a development site area. Community plot ratio is the amount of community space allocated within a development site area. Civic generosity index. So this is the extent to which a development encourages and facilitates the public life of a city. Because we could see in many places around the world, cities were getting more and more privatized and more hostile to the public domain. So we thought it was really important to measure how good a citizen the building is within the city. Ecosystem contribution index is the degree to which a development supplements the city's ecosystem. So we can see greenery not just as decoration or pleasant or environmental services like air cleaning or absorbing heat, but also as a habitat for animals, birds, insects, lizards that can come back into the city and actually share the planet with us. And self-sufficiency index is a development's capacity to provide its own energy, food, and water. This was motivated because we could see many cities have a huge ecological footprint. And when you look at the human footprint on Earth, it actually takes more than the entire planet. So we think it's very urgent to try and shrink our ecological footprint. And the best way to do this is if cities can shrink their footprint to the size of the city.
We've also come to realized through our practice and our sort of research that urban designs and master plans are critical for us to try and achieve self-sufficiency in our developments. The aggregate of individual buildings are too long to achieve the aims, but if we actually can handle larger projects like master plans and city plans, we can actually head towards a more compact ecological footprint for all our developments. And this one helps us to kind of realize the self-sufficiency of our developments as well as our cities in general.
We have another concept called prototypology. So this is to actually see every building we do as a prototype for a city of the future. And so we always look at it as a way of where it can inform future projects, or how, if it was replicated at scale, we could have those kind of system impacts from the way it performs.
So the projects that we will show you are actually, they kind of prototypes or the rethink of a particular type of use of a building. And we just wanted to show this to explain what we mean by prototypes.
So this first one is in Bali. It's actually not in a high density urban environment, but we think it's quite an interesting one to show our approach to rethinking a problem and reframing it in terms of systems and landscape. So it's on the edge of a cliff in Bali, and where we made a big change, I think, in this hotel is we flipped the architecture completely from object to space. So it's sort of a figure ground reversal in terms of what we focus everybody's attention and the experience on. So you can see it as a series of outdoor spaces and landscape, which is just framed by the architecture.
But as a hospitality project, we were interested to make it sustainable. And I think when we got this project, we discussed with our clients and we said the future of hospitality and luxury must be equated with sustainability. So I think this project from day one, when it's finished, became the darling of sustainability, and it was got very good publicity because it's one of the more prominent eco resorts.
It uses all local materials and recycled wood. So the wood is old telephone poles and railway sleepers. The stone is all from Bali or from Java.
But this being a very sort of a dry area in Bali, water was a very crucial element in the design. We wanted to harvest and recycle as much of the water to reuse in the development.
So this is a rain garden, for instance, which stores water and then slowly releases it. These are details around the site where we celebrated the journey of water from the roof down these spouts that are collected into water channels, and then they go into the recycling ponds. This is the hotel room. So you can see that as a room, it's actually really a garden, and we have very minimal separation between indoor and outdoor.
But what is nice about this room type is that we encourage people to use the room in a sort of a natural ventilated condition. So when the hotel was open, the operators actually asked the patrons and the visitors if they would like to keep the room open in the daytime, but they will only close it at night for air conditioning when they sleep. And most guests opted to have their rooms naturally ventilated in the daytime. So you can actually see the amount of energy savings that you would have.
Excuse me, Richard and Mr. Wong. So before we start the second project, we have some questions regarding.
Okay, good.
Yeah, Jessica Ma has been the guest of Alila Hotel, and it's also one of her favorite hotel experience. And we're wondering, so in this particular case, what's the biggest challenge in this project, and how did you solve the problem?
Actually, I mean, from a design point of view, I think a challenge was that it was a very, it was quite a flat site despite being on the edge of a cliff. And that actually drove us into quite a compressed single-story form so that each layer could look over the next one. But what was interesting, it actually enabled us to create this very landscape solution where rather than a high-pitched Balinese roof, we would use a very low-pitched roof covered with volcanic stones. And so it was sort of a view design strategy mixed with an environmental strategy, mixed with a landscape strategy. At first it was very challenging to the client because they said these buildings maybe don't look very Balinese. But in the end, we said it was not so much about a stereotype of what Balinese architecture was, but it was about really experiencing this particular place and this particular site. So rather than it being Bali, it was about the Bukit Peninsula, where this is located in this very dry climate on a gently sloping site on the edge of a cliff.
Thanks. And also, I noticed that there are design languages start from the architecture facade and also this pavilion. And I also noticed that the water collection system also followed this design concept. So we're wondering where this design concept or inspiration comes from.
Actually, there was a sort of interesting other observation we made that many aspects of traditional Balinese architecture, they quite reminded us of Carlo Scarpa details, and other aspects of the pavilion reminded us of Mies van der Rohe courtyard houses. So we thought it was interesting to make a connection between this sort of very particular site expression and in a way the building sort of shaking hands between cultures, saying these are tourists coming here who come from a different culture anyway, who have a relationship to the visual culture and architectural canon of Western architecture. So in a way, it's rather than foreigners pretending to be Balinese, we thought it was very interesting to have the architecture as a dialogue between Western culture and Balinese culture. And then, of course, very infused with the location of the site.
Interesting. Thank you. So let's move on to the next project.
The next project is Park Royal on Pickering. So quite a few years after the Alila project. And it's located in Singapore in the heart of the city, but we're very interested in creating a very green and garden experience, this one being in the CBD.
So this green area that you see in front of the hotel is a piece of land that in 1876, sort of a wealthy Chinese businessman donated this piece of land as a park for the workers. So this is Singapore's first and only private public park. And when we are asked to do this project, we wanted to kind of match the civic generosity of this philanthropist, and that we created the same amount of parks as sky gardens and sky terraces within the hotel. So we have almost created 250% of the site area of gardens within the hotel. So you see a video clip of it, and what it actually makes it very clear that this hotel does look very different in terms of a building, in terms of material and finishes compared to other buildings, because it has quite a bit of integrated landscaping built into the form.
The spatial design makes us feel like the building is introducing nature into itself.
Yes, so you can see several of our strategies here. So the multiple ground levels, for instance, we have a stack of different ground planes going up. The topographical architecture, so the building is more like a landscape than a building, and the different parts of the building appear as smaller buildings within the landscape rather than being a single object that you read as one building.
Okay.
But at the same time too, this is for us a very high density solution, but at the same time creating high amenity to the users.
And what we like to, I think it gives you really unique experiences in the city. So just sit in one of these pavilions or swim in the pool, you get to enjoy the city in a completely different way.
But what is interesting is that this building and this hotel has sort of got a lot of attention from social media and from people. And I think it's really because there is very domestic details within the development, and that people can actually see them and relate them from the street level. So it actually gets photographed a lot.
So we have a question regarding this project. So in terms of construction, I mean, the structural design, what is the biggest challenge in this project?
Singapore, we're not an earthquake zone. Oops, I'll just leave it on the video. So we're not an earthquake zone, and compared to China, where you have to make the buildings very geometric and very strong, in Singapore you can be a little looser. And so the biggest challenge was probably managing all that different contours of the topographic architecture, because we needed to do it in a way that was fairly buildable. And so we came up with a system of regular panels and radius of curves and pieces. So with a few molds, you could actually make the entire landscape form.
It looks like a sort of a very different looking building and difficult to construct, but in reality, it wasn't that difficult. It was a fairly straightforward kind of construction. And I think the only thing that was a little bit of a challenge was when the building is finished, almost everyone wanted to have instant gardens and instant landscaping, but it does take something like 6 months to a year for the landscaping to actually feel lush and mature. So I think the anxiety at the beginning was really how to get it really lush and sort of green, so that it actually shows off the quality that we wanted from the design.
Thank you.
Okay.
That is worse.
So this next project that we are showing is a social housing project. And I think in Singapore, 85% of Singaporeans live in public housing. And this is the kind of developments that Singaporeans get to live in. But this was a special one because we've been asked to reimagine public housing in the 21st century. And this actually has a lot of groundbreaking, radical ideas for housing.
So the general concept, it was 960 apartments, which in Singapore is pretty large. Maybe in Beijing it may not be that large. But we were quite concerned that we wanted to foster the sense of community, but we felt 960 apartments is too big. You'll never know your neighbours. So we're really keen to break it down. So that idea of a city within a city, or a vertical village. And so the idea was we would take some aspects of old public housing, which were seen as very sociable, like the old 11-story or 10-story blocks where you could see the face of your neighbor as they were walking on the ground.
Or you can hear the person when you actually shout from the top floor to the ground floor.
The next model in Singapore from maybe the 80s was the point block, which was very private, which people liked, but actually there was a sense that you no longer knew anyone living in your block.
So at most you only know 4 neighbors within the same floor. So it wasn't such a sociable sort of idea.
So we came up with this module, which was sort of a combination of the old 10-story slab block with the new point block. And we hope to create the best of the sociability as well as the privacy with this idea. And so we put 80 of them together in one 10-story block. But the important thing was they shared a common volume. So everyone who would come in and out of the lift could look down into a common space. And if they could see their neighbor there, they could wave hello. Their kids could play together there or study there. You could walk your dog there. So it became like a village with a town square. And then what we did, we stacked up 12 of these to get our 960 apartments. And then we made a fully public park on the top as well.
So in terms of even higher density, it's actually possible. So it could actually go even higher and more connected as well. But what is really nice that is within this development, you have almost a 200-meter long horizontal Sky Street and Sky Park, not only just one time, but almost 4 times in the building.
Wow. It's really a breathable architecture. And from what you have explained, this the circulation in this building is infinite.
Yes. And actually very good in the recent COVID pandemic as well, because these sort of spaces are, you know, within your building, you don't have to leave, but you can get out of the apartment and you can exercise and you can sit in the garden and get the sun.
So One Sky Village would share some of these spaces, which we call it the Village Green and the Village Town Hall.
This is a real human scale.
Yeah. So what is really interesting too for us is that now that this building has been finished for almost 6-7 years, Richard. So we have done some post occupation surveys, and what is interesting is that the people here do know more neighbors than other types of social housing. So this is actually confirmed the social engineering idea that we wanted is actually working well.
The university did a study. So this block, people tended to know 10 sets of neighbors versus other blocks where they only knew 3.
Oh, in this neighborhood, we say hi more often than those
yes.
buildings.
So people are more friendly. And I think it's because we created more opportunities for people to meet. And I think when you use lifts, which is vertical, it's not a very social space because it's very tight and congested. But when you can actually walk horizontally in the Sky Streets and the Sky Parks within the development, you start to make friends and you start to actually talk to one another. And I think this is the idea behind social public housing in Singapore.
And life experience making architecture.
Exactly. It's architecture about framing social interaction rather than just being about form.
This
want to do this one?
So this is an interesting one because this is a typical typology of a skyscraper. And with this skyscraper, we were able to create a new typology, a tropical typology that actually replaces the site area by more than 10 times of greenery. And at the same time, we were able to create horizontal, almost the same size as the site area as community spaces within the development. So we almost created 3 sort of community spaces that you will see in the video clip as follows. That makes it very sociable as well.
Actually, sorry to interrupt. Design WOHA published this project a few years ago, and it has been a blast. And last night, one of our fans delivered a comment that they said they knew this project a long time ago, but they don't know the name. And finally, they are excited that you guys here to present this project. We're very excited to see this project again on Design WOHA.
This project is very unique because you can stand in the middle of the building and you can actually see 4 sides and see through all 4 sides, and it's not possible in a skyscraper to be able to stand in the middle because you would have the lift core in the middle.
So just show what's in the project. So it's actually a mixed-use project. There's 2 different category of hotel rooms, as well as an service office area and the car park.
And for each component, we have a sky terrace, and on each sky terrace, we have 30 species of trees and shrubs in it. And on the facade itself, we have a vertical mesh that have got 20 species of climbers and creepers on it, achieving a rim plot ratio of 1,100%.
We think that's a really interesting ratio because what it means is, even in a city with no green, if you put in just 1 in 10 buildings being like this, you could achieve an average of 100% across the city.
But what is also interesting is that we also did some biodiversity projection on this building, an ecosystem projection. What it actually does is that if this was a piece of a lowland tropical forest, this building actually performs the ecosystem services of that forest up to about 30%. And it has the same amount of biodiversity as the neighborhood parks that are quite close to this development as well.
On this video, you can actually see the plants growing over time. And we think that's very interesting too, that it's a building that is always changing and always different.
We always get comments from friends and from designers who sometimes would message us or email us, or in the Instagram to social media, would tell us how they enjoy seeing this building change over time.
Is it difficult to maintain the facade?
It is really easy. You can see from this picture, the landscaping is actually at the ground level. So this is the term we like to use. It's multiple ground level. Ground level means that you can actually walk on it and you can actually maintain the plants at that level.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't need a building management unit to actually maintain the landscaping. You maintain it from walking to the planter or to the garden to actually maintain it.
So behind the mesh, there's actually walkways with the planter boxes. So it's very, very easy to get to all the plants.
And what is really nice is that at the 10th floor of this building, the hotel general manager has told us that they have spotted squirrels in the mornings.
Wow.
In this building. Next page. Okay. We will move on to the next project. So this project is a very different one. It's a social mixed-use housing typology where it actually layers on quite different uses. We have social elderly housing, we have a medical center, we have daycare facilities for both the young and for the elderly. It has a very large public plaza for the community and for this entire a neighborhood. We also have got retail component, and but what is interesting is that it's an urban connector and an urban connection towards the MRT station, which is adjacent to the site. So this is the site area, and basically normally you would have we would have these 4 different uses and they will be separate buildings, but we choose to actually interpret it as a single integrated development where on the 1st and 2nd floor we have the retail units, retail component, and on the 3rd and the 4th floor is the medical center that provides shade and shelter for covered tropical plaza space. And on top of that, we have the community uses where we have the daycare facilities for both the young and the old, and we actually drape it across with a sky park that becomes a semi-public park for the elderly housing. So you have this elderly housing, which is, you can see from 6 months later, you actually see this a mature sky park on top of it. So as we see from the section, what is being layered on is the basement. We have the supermarket and a public plaza on the 1st floor. 2nd floor is the a hawker center, which you see this as a community dining room. And the 3rd and 4th floor is the medical center with a courtyard in the middle. And then on top, we have the social housing and the sky park.
This one has been very successful, very popular with the surrounding community. It was so popular, the Prime Minister broadcast his National Day address from the place. This is the public space, so everybody walks through here from around the district to get to the train station. And there's many of these exercise and events being held here by the local community.
So you have retail on the ground floor, the food court on the second floor, and it overlooks the public plaza. And the public plaza, we call it a tropical community space, can be used throughout the year, rain or shine. And this would be one of the typical sort of a studio unit for elderly.
We did a biological survey, so there's actually more species of plants and animals in our garden, which was designed for biodiversity, than there are in the neighbourhood parks around, which are on the ground. The medical centre you're looking at here with the courtyard.
So we also designed the interiors and the furniture to sort of give people the illusion that this is actually the 70s and the 80s interiors, where these are the people who will be using this medical center.
This is a child care, which is next to the elderly care. And there's a group of people from the building and the neighborhood who run this community farm. So there's a whole lot of herbs and vegetables and fruit which is grown here.
So what is really interesting about this integrated development is that it's become so successful that the government is implementing this in many, many different estates in Singapore.
We wish we have more architectures that is mixed use and also mix of age. And it's a really, because I think it's due to urban design, and we see many places that the age has been categorized in different communities. And when I see this project, the Compound Admiralty, I think this is the way to the future, also because of the global aging. I think this phenomenon will come up in the next 20 years. We will need more buildings like this.
In fact, we will show you a project later that we will show you is actually in Hangzhou. We tried to implement this typology. I think we were the winner for the competition, but we were not engaged to execute the designs. But I think this situation of elderly needing to provide for elderly housing is happening to China.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this project is a university building. Well, it's an entire university, actually, a new campus as one large connected building. It's located in Bangladesh, in Dhaka, for a NGO-run university.
But what is important for us is to do the right thing in a developing country and a poor country and city like Bangladesh, Dhaka, and that we wanted to set a good example of what a good passive design is, and also with very good strategies to minimize energy usage, and also at the same time create enough clean energy to power more than 60% of the energy needs of this university. It's a very compact design. It's 12 stories. It has a very large solar canopy on top that provides clean energy for up to 60% of the energy needs for this university. And this university would actually cater to about 15,000 undergraduates and postgraduate students. On the lower levels is a sort of the university meets the community and the public. At any time, the public would be sort of welcome to visit the university on the lower levels, and on the upper levels is a more secure sort of academic area where the students would learn with all these interesting and inspiring spaces. And on the roof, you would have even a cricket field and running track and swimming pool. But what is interesting is that most of the social spaces, the circulation spaces, are not air-conditioned. In fact, this is seen as a design as a wind machine where the building funnels the prevailing wind through the breezeways and help create cross ventilation to all the 1 unit thick classrooms.
When will this?
It's under construction at the moment. It's halfway through construction. It hopefully will finish in about 2 years' time.
2 years' time.
Yes.
I'm sure when it's built, it will be one of the most green university in Bangladesh.
Yeah, we hope so too. I think it will be a very sort of an interesting and a very different kind of a university building in the tropics.
And also a landmark.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us that it becomes a catalyst for change in the city.
Great.
So this is it's back to Singapore again. This is our latest offering in hospitality. Is the Pan Pacific Hotel in Orchard in Singapore. And Orchard Road is a famous tourist belt in Singapore, and a lot of the hotels there are aging. And this is actually a redevelopment of an existing very old hotel into a brand new hotel that has, what is really interesting is that it's like, it creates 4 boutique hotels within one. And we have the ground floor, which we call the Forest Terrace, where this is what you greeted with a lot of sort of water and tall forest trees. It will be quite misty in the morning.
And so this one is again an example where we're doing architecture and interiors with the landscape concept together. And so creating really a total environment of indoor, outdoor, and in-between spaces. And we think it's something where you have a lot of potential versus just a sort of architectural shell and an interior core.
So the second datum, which is the second boutique hotel within one, is actually bringing the beach into an urban hotel. So this is the beach terrace. So as you sort of zoom out of the this image, you will see is actually an elevated beach in the building. And as you go up to the next terrace, is the garden terrace.
Wherever you go, there's always a garden.
Yes. And this one is a garden terrace where you can actually conduct business cocktail parties, event launches, fashion shows, and even have a wedding on this garden terrace. And you have rooms actually looking down on this terrace, and that it feels like a smaller boutique hotel within a larger hotel. And then on the very, very top datum, the top boutique component, we have the cloud terrace. And instead of putting the banquet hall in the ground level, we choose it to put at the top on the clouds so that you can have wedding in the clouds.
Excuse me, sorry for interrupting you. So how many suites in this building?
There will be about 356 room suites in this one.
And about average size of the room type?
It's about 30 square meters.
30 square meters. Okay.
So they're not huge rooms, but they're very
in Singapore. The room sizes are usually quite small. Okay. The next 3 projects, we will show you some of our projects as sort of prototypes in China. And this one is a urban typology of a headquarter building, where we wanted to create a lot of mixed use within the headquarters and also to infuse with a lot of amenities. So not only would you work and live within this headquarters, you would have amenities that are like gyms, running tracks, swimming pools, convention, very, very vibrant, very mixed use. So that you hardly need to live, or rather you hardly need to sort of travel too far away from the building. And that hence you could actually compact the size of the ecological footprint of this building. And here we saw this skyscraper as a slice of landscape where all the water is collected from the top and through remediation help cleanse the water as it goes down to the bottom, and at the same time create a wonderful natural biophilic quality within the development. And yet it is a very forward-thinking development where it sort of envisaged flying drones, drone taxis, and drone deliveries within the building.
The building also creates its own view. So rather than looking out at someone else's building, you get to look across this beautiful, romantic landscape.
Sorry, we have a question. So when you present the design to the client, when they disagree with you, how do you persuade the design, or how do you handle a difficult design requirement? Sometimes we have some strange design requirements.
Yeah, I think for us, we try to talk to sort of clients from the user's point of view. And I think in, like this is meant to be a headquarters typology, we talk as if we are the people, the office people, the workers within this building, and to tell them what we want and expect of the office and the headquarters. And I think if you tell them that this is to increase our productivity, to create an interesting, inspiring, and creative environment, we can be more productive and we can do a better job for you. Most developers, most clients actually see this as a good and different perspective.
Yeah, because I think otherwise it's like, oh, architect wants this, client wants this, but if you can agree on what their users, the stakeholders need and want, which is good for business, you know, then it's not so much a clash of the architect versus the client. It's more like everybody together figuring out what's the best thing to do. So we always try and find a way where we're not clashing and where the architectural idea is really very closely linked to the driver behind the project. And then we find we don't get so much conflict.
That's pretty convincing.
So the next one is a future house, a community project in Hangzhou, where I think China, through the last 25 to 30 years, through its very fast urbanization, the inner city now needs to rejuvenate and rebuild. So this one is actually a rebuilding of a inner city part of Hangzhou into a much higher density, and at the same time catering to the elderly and also the young, the talented community, trying to bring the talents to Hangzhou and to actually have a very vibrant community of elderly and also the talented young. So we wanted the basement level and the ground level to be very vibrant, where we have very mixed use, almost as if it's a very vibrant street, and that we would have a sort of Sohos and offices for the talented young on the upper levels. And then right at the very top, we have very private and very secure elderly housing for families, for young families as well for elderly. And this is a project that we are doing, that we do realize that our tropical ideas has to work for temperate zone too, and that we were able to create not only green gardens, but also winter gardens that you could actually enjoy greenery throughout the year.
Four-season garden.
Yeah, and so whereas in our tropical ones, it might be fully open, for a winter garden, we can glaze it in, make it a sun trap.
So here you can see there's also some conservation of very old factories, and here in this case, a funnel, which is part of the factory. And as we go into the sort of a vibrant community datum, you actually see recreational spaces, retail spaces, and sort of civic spaces, all very well integrated together. And here you can see the community of housing above. And what we'd like to sort of introduce is through all the corridors, we call them social spaces. And in here, we attach on what we call this mahjong cabanas. And this is where we want to encourage the community to come and use these cabanas in a refreshing way, or to come here and play mahjong, or to have a sort of tea together. And you can see also there's a running track, not only on the 5th level, but you also have a sort of a recreational deck on the roof level as well. So these are the winter gardens.
So you can see it's a kind of three-dimensional city. It's very loose and open rather than being a very compact building. But we think this is the kind of way to treat density in a way that it's not overwhelming or frightening, but it's a way that you can really enjoy a three-dimensional vertical city.
I think it is becoming a reality.
Yes. I think each project we finish, people see that it's possible and that it works. And so we're able to expand the idea into larger and larger projects.
And the rooftop is a wonderful sort of a park for the residents. And they could actually enjoy the views all the way to the West Lake.
I have a question. So when you are incorporating landscape design, so in each countries you work with different landscape team, or you are doing this also by yourself?
We are very good landscape architects ourselves. We know plant materials. Because I'm from Singapore, I'm familiar with the tropics. Richard is from Perth. He's also very familiar with landscaping in a different climate. So together, we kind of know plants around the world.
And we do a lot of gardening, so we do understand the needs of plants. I think many architects don't have green thumbs maybe, or they don't understand how much light plants need to survive, for instance. So I think we're quite sensitive that plants are living beings. They eat sunlight. You know, they can't take the strong winds and things. So there's you really have to see the plants as being your end users as well, your clients, and give them a home that they like. You can't just stuff green anywhere in the project.
Looks the plants live comfortable on your buildings.
Yes, they all generally do very well, because we think that we understand plants very well, and that and like Richard say, we think that the plants are also the end users and also animals too.
Why I ask this question is because in particular in China, the architects focus on architecture design and the landscape people doing their own thing. So in most of the there are two teams.
I think we're very unique because, or rather people think that we are not architects, nor are we landscape architects, but because we put plants in our buildings, we seem to be the ones who understands what it takes to have landscaping integrated into buildings.
But this is really part of that systems thinking. So landscape is a system that has certain requirements and contributes many things. You know, community is also, you have to see it as a system, like how people behave and how they interact and where they gather. So our buildings, we really look at all these social systems, environmental systems, economic systems, and we're very interested to see what kind of architecture is needed to incorporate those systems.
So this project, the Vertical Talent City, is very unique and peculiar to China. But I think it's something that would be, that the rest of the world will probably look at it and realize what a wonderful idea it is to try to welcome talents into your city and to try and roll out the red carpet and to actually bring them back, or to nurture these talented people so that they can flourish within the city. So this Vertical Talent City is over 2 plots of land, but we've created, not through lifts, but through escalators, vertical streets and horizontal streets within the development that emphasizes on social creating awareness among people. So you can see this video is done through going through escalators and through the streets. There are actually 4 stratums in this development, where we have the talent park, where the talents are welcome and introduced in the city. Then we have the learning and the training campus. And then the next datum would be the incubation hub, where the talents would go about creating their the next or creating or spotting the next unicorn, where they would meet the business and the community. And once they are sort of ready, then they would create their own companies elsewhere. And the top datum and the top stratum would be this smart community, where we actually would have housing for the talented community. So they usually come when they are young and with young children as a young family, and then they would stay here for a couple of years before they then be more successful and actually move out of this city. So you can see it has its social spaces, it has got its own recreational and community spaces. This is a building we wanted to show because we think that it's actually a very good building for the post-COVID-19 pandemic, where this building doesn't use lifts as much as staircases and escalators. We are not in a congested environment and a congested space, and it relies just on horizontal and inclined movement for circulation in this building. Okay. We just have 2 more projects to show you. These are 2 more of Singapore projects. This is the Singapore Pavilion at the World Expo Dubai, which is supposed to happen this year, but it's most likely going to happen next year. And this project is about creating an oasis in a desert, creating a man-made ecosystem that is self-sufficient by itself. It actually has a roof that is full of, is a full solar voltaic roof that creates the self-sufficient energy for the pavilion, and also to desalinate the groundwater for use in this building. So we created a three-dimensional garden. The floor, the walls, and ceiling is a integrated landscaping, and you actually walk through this three-dimensional landscape to the very top level where the communication happens between the visitors and the host. So at this top level, you get a very good view of the surrounding, and we call this the sky market, where you would be able to communicate with people. So this is what we are used to seeing in the tropics, but we are doing it as a zero energy pavilion in a desert.
I can imagine the amount of oxygen here.
Yes, I think that the actual experience of the air will give people in the desert a taste of the tropical air.
This is the last project that we show you. This is a project that we just recently been awarded. Is to build a sort of an outdoor performance stage, as well as a national landmark that houses the National Service Gallery in the heart of Singapore in Marina Bay. But the important thing for our winning entry was to layer onto the Iron Pace master plan a very strong landmark, a sort of a venue that is that counters the promontory on the other side of the bay.
So basically complete the axis set up by Iron Pace on the other side of the bay.
And here, this is a 30-seater
30,000.
30,000, yes, seater stadium. And also there is a National Service Gallery and lots of sports and community users. Here you can see there's actually a flying swimming pool, a restaurant, and also sea sports amenities. And here it emphasizes on the Marina Bay axis.
It's a multi-purpose arena where all kinds of events can happen. It was designed together with Populous. And it really completes Singapore's Marina Bay, which is right in the heart of the CBD. NS is Singapore's national service, so every Singaporean male has to perform national service in the army for almost 2 years, is it now? And so the gallery celebrates their contribution to the nation.
So it's essentially a venue for national celebration, be it National Day or New Year's Day, or Chinese New Year, Qingye celebrations. It will take place in this national landmark.
Wow. So.
Okay, I think that's the end of our
president. Shall we stop sharing and come back to it?
Thank you for walking us through or your stunning project, and there are lots of comments from our group chat. So we just select 3 questions to you, and the first one, let me read. One of our fans said, WOHA projects always deeply attracted me. I'm an interior design student from Lasalle College of Art in Singapore. WOHA project let human close with human and nature, also bring natures in. Sorry, I did read through. Use sustainable materials. This year we are facing an epidemic. Could you have a new perspective and design direction for future architecture?
Actually, what we've realized is our natural tendency to do indoor-outdoor places with a lot of public space or semi-public, semi-private is actually very suited to the pandemic because people are not trapped inside the interior of a building. They have many ways of going outside and experiencing nature without necessarily being in the public. And as Mun Summ mentioned, moving around the buildings, we're often not indoors, but we're in an outdoor area. And so I think it wasn't why we designed it that way, but I think in a way it's from the same philosophy that we want to do something very resilient, very simple, something where the buildings are not all run by machines and very high technology, but rather they pull the buildings apart, they breathe. And so I think, you know, as Mun Summ mentioned, maybe less elevators in future because they seem to be a small constrained space with strangers is not good for the pandemic. So probably we'll see more escalators and even more exploration of this idea of the building as a city within itself with streets and ways of moving about it that doesn't involve.
So I think the idea of the sky streets and sky parks is very relevant in this in the post COVID-19 world. I think what people really want is again more spaces and not to be sort of congested into a congested and indoor environment. And I think our belief and our one of our sort of strong points is high density, high amenity, where we think it's actually necessary for us. If we keep increasing our density, our cities must get more compact, and a higher density is not a problem, but we must at the same time create a higher amenity at the same time as we increase the density. So if you increase the density, you must also at the same time create more parks for the people, more outdoor spaces for people. So it is not just limited to the indoor spaces, but we must also create the outdoor spaces in our buildings as well.
And childcare and sports, all those sort of spaces.
Sure. And what I just found in common is that it's nature that people tend to connect each other, and also it's the plants' nature that they grow together. So I think WOHA's approach that bringing these two natures together.
Yes, we also find, I think, that like buildings are somehow, although we're architects and we love architecture, it's very stressful to be surrounded by architecture all the time, like for your eyes and your mind. But if you look at a plant, it wasn't designed by a human being. So you don't have to react to it in the same way as you do a cultural artifact, you know, like a building which was designed by somebody and there's a story behind it. It becomes somehow almost like it's talking to you too much. And somehow nature, you can just react to it in a way that is not so loaded with meaning maybe, or it's different sort of meanings where you feel more detached and peaceful and you can let go a little bit of the things in your mind. So we think it's really critical for psychological reasons in dense cities that people are not always looking at other windows with other people looking back at them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so second question is more specific for Oasis Hotel. And our fans asked, so the question is, what are the advantages of splitting high-rise buildings into a smaller self-sustained system?
I think this one is, I think the value of Oasia Hotel Downtown is the fact that this is actually a very high density. It's a skyscraper on a very small footprint. We were able to break this skyscraper into, again, 3 datums. We had a mixed, sort of an office Soho component where people could live or work in that component. They share a common space where they have a swimming pool and also some social spaces. So that itself is 1/3 of the building that is actually a smaller component, a in a sense, a sky village, which is quite nice because you will have about 100 units in it and 100 families or companies, and that is a very nice size sort of a community. And then we actually have the two components of the hotel where they also form a similar size sort of a community. And while that is a transient community, it actually does allow people to come into the common spaces like the lawn that we saw, where we had one kid who actually run around. You don't really see how a small child can actually run in an open space in a high-rise skyscraper form. So this is a very unique design, and that it actually does create this kind of spaces that it's not seen in other skyscraper itself. But what for us is also very important is that this building itself has shown that it actually does have the same amount of biodiversity in terms of the species of insects and birds as compared to the adjacent neighborhood park. So on a building site with no park itself, no green space on the ground level, it had the same amount of biodiversity as a neighborhood park. So if more buildings were like this, we could actually bring back a lot of biodiversity into our dense built environment. So this is the strongest message we have for this building, is that as a building itself that almost occupied the entire site area, we were able to create a vertical park that can actually bring back urban biodiversity.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I just with the question, what's the advantage? I think the advantage is by seeing the project as a cluster of things, you can make each thing perform the way you want it to perform without worrying how to like put granite and a curtain wall all over it and say, you know, this building is an object with its own character. Instead you say, this is a vertical neighborhood. Maybe it's got shops, maybe it's got apartments, maybe it's got a hotel, maybe it's got a park. So it sort of frees up what you can do with the building by thinking of it in this way. So instead of one thing that you're chopping up into different uses inside, you're saying it's actually just, it's like I took a piece of the city and I stacked it up on top of each other.
Actually, on another note, which is also interesting as well, is that this is actually a very dense part of Singapore where the buildings next door are about only 20 meters away. So during construction of this building, the people in the next building were saying, I'm very worried that my property value is going to go down because I have this big building coming up. So people were very worried, and there were a lot of, in the social media, people expressing their concerns, and some people were actually telling us they're very concerned. But as the building was finishing, and then where the plants started going in, and then people realized that they were looking at landscaping, trees and swimming pool